Forgiveness is a well-studied concept in social research, encompassing a range of psychological, social, and health-related dimensions. Forgiveness is generally defined as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards a person or group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness can be categorized into different types, such as interpersonal forgiveness between individuals, self-forgiveness is forgiving oneself, and societal forgiveness within groups or communities. There are proven benefits. Forgiveness has been associated with lower levels of anxiety, depression, and stress. It promotes emotional well-being and resilience. Individuals who practice forgiveness tend to have a higher self-esteem and more positive self-perceptions. Forgiveness is crucial for maintaining healthy and satisfying relationships. It helps to repair and strengthen bonds between individuals. Forgiveness can facilitate conflict resolution and reconciliation, reducing the likelihood of ongoing or escalating disputes. The practice and perception of forgiveness can vary significantly across cultures. In some cultures, forgiveness is a highly valued virtue, while in others, it may be seen as a sign of weakness. The context in which forgiveness occurs, such as the severity of the offense, the relationship between the parties, and the presence of apologies or reparations, can influence the process and outcome of forgiveness. There are some barriers to forgiveness, like the nature of the offense. Severe offenses, especially those involving betrayal or significant harm, can be harder to forgive. Perceived intent, if the harm is perceived as intentional, forgiveness becomes more difficult. Lack of remorse, the absence of an apology or remorse from the offender, can hinder the forgiveness process. Forgiveness is often linked to spiritual well-being, with individuals reporting a sense of peace and fulfillment as a result of forgiving. Many religions emphasize forgiveness as a moral imperative and provide frameworks for understanding and practicing forgiveness. There are some research challenges, however, in the study of forgiveness. Accurately measuring forgiveness can be challenging due to its subjective nature. Researchers use various scales and self-report measures to assess forgiveness. Long-term studies are needed to better understand the enduring effects of forgiveness over time and in different contexts.